But I was curious, like, has your perception of weighing the immediate versus the future shifted at all?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's I think it's a disservice to be fixed and closed off on on anything that can help the football team, and obviously with which you're weighing the future and the right now. But bottom line is that we have to make those kind of decisions to make sure that we're in the appropriate let's call it window from a financial standpoint. To be able to make the moves that we want to make. But no, and I've always been open-minded with that. It's just that we've been in kind of different windows every single year as we've gone through this journey. So I've been open-minded with that for sure.
How does that affect just how you approach free agency versus the draft? You change depending on where your team is, but how does that look this particular offseason?
It doesn't really affect, I would say, the draft for sure. We always kind of take the same approach with the draft. But, the only thing from a free agency standpoint, that might change certain things. But just we have to make sure that we're prepared. We have to make those decisions on if we do any kind of restructures or any kind of stuff. But those decisions will affect the next decision in terms of how much available finances you'll have to spend. Say that one more time.
That you still won't be taking those vacation days. Things that you have to take care of.
Yeah, I mean it's case by case, because at the end of the day, the decisions that we have to make, or that we're always or that we have been faced with, is that you don't have two separate budgets, right? It's only one budget. It's only one pot, right? And so when you take the philosophy of draft, develop, and retain, right? Well, the more let's take the word retain. Well, the word retain means pay. You gotta pay money, all right? So if there's one budget, you don't have your own retained player budget and then a separate external free agent budget. Now you can splice it up within that one budget. This is how much you want to use to retain our own players. This is how much you want to use for external free agents. But the more you retain, that smaller that budget becomes. So, but there's still, but we'll have flexibility to do some things. So I don't think every single year is the same. It's not just last year we had that approach, but it could be entirely different this year. Yeah. Yeah, look, I've been in touch with David's his agent and his representation. Obviously, look, we love David. He's a great player. We love to have him. Kind of want to put last year in the rear view and just move forward. But obviously, a player has to want to be at a certain place as well. So those conversations are still fluid, and then we'll just kind of see how it goes. What's that?
So what has he told you in that regard?
His agent? Yeah, those are conversations that I'll keep in-house. But I would say that I've had healthy dialogue with David at the end of the year, and I've had healthy dialogue with his agent.
Brad, what kind of clarity have you guys received recovery timelines for Kobe and Brian Branch? How might that impact what you guys need to see?
Yeah, some of it, look, they're both doing everything they can to get as healthy as possible. We haven't put a hard timeline or deadline, but we've been in regular communication with our medical staff. Our medical staff has been in regular communication with the player, obviously working with them. So I know that they're on track to get as healthy as possible. But I think in like another month or so, then we'll obviously know a lot more.
You guys announced your staff for the 2026 season. What are you hoping to achieve with some of your staff changes this year, and what excites you about the staff changes?
Well, I think what excites me is that it wasn't we didn't have to endure the turnover that we had to endure the previous year. I mean, that's hard, man. Like that's a challenge. Now, when you have success, you got to be prepared for those challenges as well. But to get the OC that we were able to get in Drew and even adding, Kafka as well, but not having this wholesale turnover, that was kind of best of both worlds. So I don't want to say it was better than I expected, but we feel really good about having Drew come on board as the new OC and then still be able to retain all the other members of the coaching staff.
Talk about retaining as part of the salary cap. You got some exceptional guys this year.
Yep.
Gibbs, Campell,
Yep.
any movement on that or expectations there?
Yeah, we're still having discussions with that. Those are all players that we feel are core players that we want to keep around. They're part of our foundation. But again, it just goes back to the, retaining, okay, that's paying, and then it's, well, how much additional resources do you have going forward? And look, there's a lot of different, timelines and levers that we'll have at our disposal, but those are all players that you routed off that we see as key pieces that we want to keep around for a long time.
Brad, how do you think you need to be to take that? How big a player do you need to be in some of those outside additions to take that step back to contention? As good a team as you were.
Yeah, we're just going to do what's the best for our football team, which we always have. That's always a subjective lens, in terms of what we want to do, in terms of maybe what some others may think, but we're just going to do the best thing possible. So there's nothing that we've restricted ourselves on in terms of, well, we're not going to do this because we want to do this. So we're being very open-minded. Look, when you go through what we went through last year, like I spoke of at the end of the season, you don't have a choice but to, have those long, hard looks and be very open-minded to make sure that you're looking at every possible avenue to improve the football team.
Brad, you guys have had the NILs for several years, and you're evaluating guys that are financially set. How do you gauge hunger, desire? Does it change at all?
Yeah, I think it is what it is. You are dealing with a different, let's call it, athlete coming into the NFL. And that's where I think past just acquiring the players and having the coaches, that's really where those other departments on your staff really come into play with, player engagement and player wellness and all of that, just to make sure that, that they understand that it's different at this level, but the resources that they're getting at their level, you got to have, different conversations with those players, but you still have to set the same expectations. But I can't say otherwise that it definitely is different. It's something that we've never really experienced in the past, but, all you can do is just make the necessary adjustments and adapt. The only reason I'm going to refrain from answering that is this, because I felt like in the past I've been a little bit more liberal answering like the positions of strengths, strengths, weaknesses, all that. But I have felt in the past few years that I'll feel one way right now, and then a month later, I feel completely different. And I do think that's a natural feeling. I think that feeling should happen because I think that's a testament of all the work that entails of this whole draft prep process. It's not as easy as like, oh man, it's a lot of defensive ends, available for this draft right now in late February, early March. Well, come early April, that might not be the case. And so those are some of the things that I kind of have spoken with you guys about in the past, of just information that's not available that might shift things. So that's the only reason why I know what it appears to be. It appears to be a deep crop, and I would agree with that, but it might not be as deep as we think in about a month or so.
How did the draft a couple of years ago in Detroit? What kind of buzz did that create around your city, and what can the people in Pittsburgh look forward to this year?
It was amazing. Look, Detroit is such a not just sports town, it's such a football town. I'm probably biased just because that's the business that I'm in, but I just know what it did for our city, putting our city on the map, the small businesses that were involved in it. It was big for them. So I would expect that, Pittsburgh can really expect the same, because I know, look, my dad played for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and so I've always kind of followed that team from afar and know about that franchise. I know that they're a football town as well, so they should be excited.
Given the draft process, Center, do you see it as a priority to have a free agent at center?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're always looking not only just at the center position, but really every position. We want to add more competition, add more depth. So that's obviously just not just center, but offensive line, really both sides of the ball. Really, that's something that's not going to be ignored. So whether it's through free agency, through the draft, we'll definitely look at it. Is it more of a what? I think it's a little early to say that, but I understand your question. Obviously, it's a very important position. You got to handle a lot of information, and so there's some rookies that have been able to handle it, but it's just you just got to find the right one, and whether it's day one or day two or day three, if you find the right one, then you can. But obviously, the really kind of obvious way is a player that's already done it already, give you a little bit more comfort.
Right. On that note, you might be looking for a center this offseason, might be looking for a left tackle. Just in general, what's a more challenging position to you as a rookie to come in and start right away?
I think they're both a challenge. I don't know if there's one way, because again, you're talking about the center position with all the information that you have to handle. That's a big load. But then you're talking about the left tackle position. Having a right-handed quarterback and protecting the guy's blind side, and that's the same hurdles and challenges as a man-to-man corner. You're on an island, and these edge rushers in this league, they're real dudes that have real stuff in their body. So I would say that they're equally as important.
10 new coaching staffs, and maybe NIL within and out the draft talent the last few years. How much is the trade market an opportunity this offseason?
Yeah, I mean, you would think that it would be more active, just because you have some more regime changes. But I think you also got to look at the reality is that just because there's a regime change and a new coordinator, new head coach wants to start fresh, have their own guys, there might not be another guy to bring in to replace. So once you think it one way on the surface level, when you look at it deeper and look at the availability of, okay, does this staff have an ability to replace this player? Maybe the player was with the coach at another team. Well, just because the regime in place there doesn't mean that team wants to trade that player. So, but we've been looking at every avenue. But it's a good question. But I do think it's the reality of what the pool of available players are.
Find a few players, Levi and Josh, that their contracts totally expected back this year. What conversations have you had about this future?
Yeah, I mean, Graham. I'll start with Graham. Obviously, he's still under contract. Again, there is the start of the league year is a real date, so you want to have as much clarity as possible before then. So hopefully we get as much clarity as we can before then on Graham, and then with Levi and Josh, obviously Levi, we'll be able to bring him back, and then Josh will have the ability to bring him back as well. There's still discussions to be had about that one, but yeah, it's a possibility.
Where does Tate Ratledge fit into this?
Say that one more time. Those are still dialogue that we just got to have in the future.
Where's Tate Ratledge on the center conversation for this season?
Yeah, I think that's still I think that's a real option. Look, when we tried him out there early in camp. He wasn't doing anything wrong that we had to move him back. We just felt like where he was at the stage of his career being a rookie, we felt right guard was just going to be a little bit more of an easier acclimation for him. And then Graham's previous experience playing the position center in our offense was a little bit more easier for him as well. So at that stage, we felt like that was the right thing. But there's still promise for Tate to move in that position. But I think that's the beauty of it, is that that's flexibility that we have. So whether if we add guard, center, whatever, I think Tate will always be in that conversation.
Evaluating an older prospect.
Last two, Colton and Jory.
Evaluating an older prospect. How much you have to weigh the idea of a second contract with their agent?
Oh yeah, I think you have to, just because look, it's one of the harder things to do, but I think you can see things from the previous year to see kind of where the arrow is headed. So and look, sometimes you might be wrong. You like there's free agents in the past that I felt like the arrow was headed down in the wrong direction, and I'm not going to say it went back up, but it stayed pretty level. But they're hard decisions to make, but you got to rely on kind of what you're seeing on film currently. Okay, now you have to make the hard forecast of like, okay, another season. Okay, maybe might be fine early on, but mid to later, how's it going to look? And then also from a medical standpoint too, you got to make sure that he's intact with that as well.
Last one right here, Brad.
The NFL lost a player in Rondell Moore this
Yep.
weekend after he had battled season-ending injuries. When you think about the impact of injuries on players, how can teams support players from the psychological impact of injuries, not just the physical?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Jory. First of all, extremely sad to hear that news, and just give my condolences to his family. That was tragic to hear. But just staying on the topic of just injuries from a psychological standpoint, look, I think the easier lens from the outside is like, okay, a player suffered an injury, he's down or he's not available. But that's where I was talking about the person that asked about the NIL question and the college players coming in. It's the same thing with players with injuries, is that we have to put an incredible amount of resources and from a player wellness standpoint, in which we do. We have that as a high priority, player wellness, in terms of, making sure that we're keeping that player engaged and, making sure that player is getting all the services and resources available to him, because you're exactly right. It's not just the physical. It's the psychological component that's probably even more important. But that's a high priority for us. I think I don't want to speak for the rest of the league, but I know just being here at the Combine and all the boards that I'm on, that's always a major topic.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.